Welcome to Rough Drafts, How God Writes His Love in Our Stories, a podcast that explores the faith journeys of our friends and neighbors in Burns, Tennessee. Everyone has a story to tell, and in this podcast, we'll hear powerful and inspiring stories of how God works in the ordinary lives of people like you and me. Our stories are unfinished and perfectly imperfect. They are just rough drafts, a glimpse of what is to come because God is still at work, writing plot twists, introducing new characters, and bringing good even from the most challenging circumstances. Join us as we see what God is up to in our stories. Here's your host, Matthew Hyatt.
Welcome back to Rough Drafts. I am excited about today's podcast. It's going to be a good one. Today we have a guest. Let's see, you have heard from his son-in-law, you have heard from his daughter, and if you've been around Churches of Christ in leadership circles, you probably heard from him at some point. There are 2 or 3 people who share his name, so if you Googled him, no telling which one you've gotten.
Right.
But I have the Bob Turner today. How's that?
I'm not sure I'd be heavy on the.
Well, okay, I have a.
You have a Bob Turner.
So you guys just moved down here with Chuck and Brianna.
Yep.
And now you're in the Promised Land.
That's what I hear.
And what are you doing exactly?
So I direct a program for the Sunset International Bible Institute called SALT. It's the Sunset Academy of Leadership Training. And so I work with churches all over the country. And I usually go in, do a workshop on a weekend. But the main thing we're trying to be is a resource to congregations to help them in any area of leadership, specifically church growth more generically, but just trying to help the church in whatever way they need. So we customize everything we do to help congregation where they're at to get from where they are to where they want to be.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's an awesome job. I love it. I'm not a big fan of the travel, but as far as the work, it is amazing. So I do love it.
We joke that you're kind of the opposite of the average churchgoer because we only see you Wednesdays here.
I know. Generally, that's about right.
Because somewhere you're somewhere every Sunday doing this sort of stuff. Yeah. I know this isn't the point of the podcast or the show. This is about you, not your work or whatever. But leadership in church, that's a needed conversation.
Yeah, that might need to be a podcast for another time. But
that might need to be 12 of them.
Yeah. Well, my experience has been, and my research has shown, that the majority of congregations across the country don't have shepherds. They don't have shepherds at all, or if they do have shepherds, sometimes they don't have enough to take care of the need that exists, and so they're stressed, and they end up being decision makers, CEOs. They're managing the best way they can because they can't really be the shepherds they need to be because there's just not enough of them. And so it makes it very difficult. But that's what we're trying to help with. And so, yeah, I do love that. And I love it when the light bulb goes off and they're like, oh, yeah, we can do that.
It's interesting. The places that I have been and have had involvement with, by and large, the leaders have been high-quality, good human beings.
Mm-hmm.
However, they have had almost zero training or zero preparation. Some of them come from the business world, and there's a big difference between being on the board of a factory and being a shepherd in a church. Those are not the same thing.
That's right.
But even then, just the soft skills of helping people shepherding, we just don't prepare guys well for it. Then we can't figure out why nobody wants to do it.
I've asked shepherds across the country how many of them received any kind of training before they became a shepherd. And the only one that I had responded that in a way that said, yes, he received some training, it was that he grew up, his grandfather was an elder, and so he followed him around.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's not training. I mean, it's good. You got to see some of the things he went through and did, but we don't have in the church across the country, we don't have those kinds of things going on to where we're actually giving training, preparation, development, equipping the next generation especially to lead the church in the future. So,
and most guys learn about shepherding from what they saw at the church across town or the church they grew up at. Yeah. And this statement may be too bold, and you can walk it back for me if you'd like to. But I would say the average leadership team in the average church is not good at it.
I would agree.
So what people have learned from is to imitate something that's being executed poorly. And then in imitation, we usually take that thing and make it somewhat worse.
Well, they're practicing the model they've always seen. And that model has been basically managerial in nature rather than shepherding in nature.
Okay, just give the 2-minute spiel. What's a shepherd and what are they supposed to? What's the difference between a manager and a shepherd?
Managers tend to take care of the daily operations of who's going to do what, when they're going to do it, and make sure that all the bills are paid, make sure we have a budget, all that kind of stuff, make sure that things are done the way that we've always done them kind of thing.
Yeah.
Shepherding is a lot more relational in nature because you have to know the sheep.
Yeah.
And the way I phrase it is you don't need to just know things about the sheep. There are a lot of people who can say, well, yeah, Sally over here is going to have surgery on Tuesday, and we need to be praying about Fred because his uncle died. And they know things about the sheep. But it's a whole different matter when you know the sheep, when you know things they struggle with and things from a spiritual standpoint that are going to help them grow in their relationship with Christ. And it's not about just making sure they attend services, but making sure that they know Jesus and that
their services attend to them.
Yeah. And so one of the questions I recently asked, which I thought was very interesting with a group of elders, was, do you even know each other?
Yeah.
Because sometimes you got 3 or 4 or 5 guys sitting in a room and they really don't even know each other. And so it's kind of hard for them to know the sheep. And so
if they can't figure it out in that room, they're not going to figure it out across the congregation.
And that's exactly right. And so I really try to promote more relational type things. How do you get to know the sheep, and how can you plan around doing those things that are going to help you know them? Well, it takes time, and you have to spend that time with people.
Yeah.
And so I know it's probably more than 2 minutes, but that's what that's all about for me, is helping them develop those kind of relationships to where they know people.
One of my light bulb moments on that was early in my ministry here. We were having an elders meeting, and it was me, and I think at the time we had 2 elders. Mm-hmm. And I was discussing with them what brand of microphone we needed to buy. Oh. And one of the guys was functional at life and technology. The other, good man, good guy, probably couldn't find the on button on his phone if his wife didn't do it for him. I remember thinking, this is a really stupid conversation to be having with these guys. Like, we should have this conversation, but these are not the guys to have it with.
That's right.
They should be having a different conversation, but nobody knew how to do it differently.
Yeah.
So, okay. That's enough about why you need to go to SALT and,
Thanks for the plug.
Yeah, that's right. But it's, man, we could, and that's not just a church thing. That is a business thing that, people have learned how to run their business by copying and pasting what they've seen somewhere else. And it's not always the best model. Know your people. I don't think there's any sphere of life where know your people's not solid.
Yep. Every time. And especially from a spiritual perspective.
Yeah. So at CareNet's one of the things that I care a lot about. And Brittany, she did one of my favorite episodes of this podcast. She's our director of development and kind of handles marketing stuff. She made this presentation for us where she laid out, and she came up with these cute names for them, and I can't remember them all, but she laid out 7 characters who are the people that we interact with as CareNet. There is the youth group girl who finds out she's pregnant and scared that dad's going to kill her. There's the girl who has no religious upbringing whatsoever, no whatever, and she comes looking for a Planned Parenthood. There is Grandma, who's the church lady who wants to support us and loves us and donates and all that stuff. And part of the conversation was how, if we're not careful, Grandma June will scare off that second lady from ever coming in our door. So how do we honor and engage Grandma, who is important, and without her we couldn't do this ministry?
Yeah.
But how do we engage her in a way that she doesn't run off the second girl, so that we can, and it was a neat exercise in thinking about what your people are like. It was so good.
Well, and I'm not going to take up the time to go through all of what I'm about to share with you, but through the course of some people that I've met, some material that I've read that was recommended by specifically an individual here in Tennessee, I've put together what I call a spirituality spectrum.
Okay.
And it kind of categorizes 4 types of people. You have educational, you have relational, you have formational, and you have applicational. And each one of those is very characteristic of, you would think, a person that's educational, that's the kind of person that really wants, we need to be more about Bible study. We need to have more time, in our sermons focused on the Bible, that kind of thing. Relational people are a little more emotional in nature, and they're more family-oriented. They want to know that the person sitting on the pew or the chair next to them is a brother or sister in Christ, and they kind of like the relationship part of it. Formational type people are a little more reclusive. They're more introverted in nature, and they kind of enjoy experiencing God out here in the world and in creation, and kind of seeing where God's at work and that kind of thing. And then your applicational people are your crusaders. They're the ones who are going to be more about standing on the street corner saying, we need to take care of the homeless, and we need to take care of those who are, the social injustices of the world.
Yeah.
And so when you look at it from that perspective, and I actually have a survey that I have given to a congregation as a whole.
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting to see that most people will say that the church is in the educational quadrant, but they see themselves in a relational side of that quadrant. That very few ever see themselves on the left-hand side, formational and applicational. And here's the biggest piece. Most people out here in the world are on the left-hand side of those quadrants. They're more formational and applicational in nature. And so what we've found ourselves doing is we've got this great chasm between these two sides.
Yeah.
And we're struggling to try to help people in the world know Jesus, because we're trying to get them to be like us instead of saying, hey, if we were to come together and realize that we all need each other and work together, we would have a greater approach to making disciples, because it's like, don't try to change people from who they are, but just help them know Jesus. And so it's a really neat approach, and there are a lot of different descriptions to all of them that I left off, but those are kind of the four ways that we tend to see people religiously speaking and from the world's perspective. And people on one side of the quadrant really don't know people on the other side and don't want to.
Right.
And so
that's a lot like Sacred Pathways. He did something similar with, 12 styles of how people relate to God, with your nature person, your traditionalist, your ritualist, your justice warrior, and it's crazy. Yesterday I went to a workshop called Compelling Preaching, and it was fantastic. And one of the speakers got up and she did that exact same thing you just did. She broke it down to the four categories of people. Are we emotional people? Are we rational people? Which kind are we? And what does our preaching do? And most of the training I got was entirely in the cognitive realm. Here is the argument of what Scripture says. Let's get them information, because if you know better, you do better.
Right.
And there is some truth to that, but there's a whole lot of times in my life that I know exactly what I need to do. It's not the knowing that's the problem. It's the wanting to. One
of my favorite books was Mark Allen Powell's book called What They Hear, and it's the distance from the pulpit to the pew.
Oh.
And the idea is much of what you were just talking about, is you got all these different people from so many different educational backgrounds, religious backgrounds, the way they grew up, the life experience they've all had, and they all are looking through a different lens.
Yeah.
And so they're hearing through a different lens. And so you're talking about, for example, the prodigal son. And what are they hearing? Are they kind of connecting with the father, or are they more like the prodigal son, or are they the older brother?
And some of them are the fattened calf, wondering when they're getting slaughtered.
And so how people hear things and the way that we're communicating them makes such a big difference. And so I really wanted to attend that yesterday, but it just didn't work out.
It was so good. It was.
I imagine.
I've been to in a while. Man, it was cool. It was really cool. Okay, so I guess we should do like what this podcast is actually about, but I wanted people to get kind of a glimpse of the stuff that you do, because this is some neat stuff, and it's not just churchy, but it really helps churches. In Dixon, there's 30-something churches of Christ, and like 4,892 little Baptist churches and Pentecostal churches. I mean, there's a bunch of churches here, and there's not a one that wouldn't benefit from this. And I hate to sound a little bit cynical. One of the reasons we have struggled with unity isn't just our lack of desire sometimes or our fear. But if we don't have this sort of leadership inside churches that has a strong sense of who they are and a sense of security, not a sense of fear, we're never able to build those bridges. So the healthier our church is, the more we're going to be able to have unity with others because we won't feel threatened and all that stuff. So I don't know, man. That's a drum I beat.
Oh, well, I gave you the quadrant thing because to what this podcast is all about.
Yeah.
That has characterized my life.
Cool. So I don't even have to ask for your God story.
Well, I'm going to share the God story.
Good. That's what we're here for.
The funny thing is there have been some major turning points in my life. My dad was a preacher, and
I'm sorry.
So tell my kids that. But I grew up and hearing my whole life about God, about Jesus, and about our relationship with Him, and all those things. And like a lot of people, when I got out of high school and kind of started in high school, kind of drifting away. But, when you're a teenager, you're doing what your parents want you to do kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so when I had the opportunity to get out on my own, and I really went a whole different direction. My life was intended initially, at least in my mind, to be a country music, rock and roll guy. That was my thing, to coin the old Leonard Skinner phrase, I was a whiskey rock and roller. That was my life.
That's the title of this episode now. I hope
okay.
you're prepared for that.
And so that was the path I was on. I learned to play guitar and sang, and we put together a band, and that was the world I was living in. I mean, I was working a job during the week, but 4 nights a week, I was either in a bar somewhere playing music, or I was practicing to play, and so just all kinds of different things. And so there was some major things that took place during the course of that time that God was kind of getting my attention.
Yeah.
One of which was that we had played right before Christmas at this particular club in Little Rock, and got home, and the club burned down that night with all our equipment in it.
Okay.
And so that was right before Christmas, and so that was kind of a wake-up call, and it was like, what are we going to do? Well, some things transitioned. Our drummer left and chose to do something else, and so we tried to piece together some things, and that just wasn't working. And so the event that really took place was we had a gas leak in our house. The weld on the exchange unit of that gas heater had pulled up, and so it was circulating carbon monoxide right back into the house.
Oh.
Well, I woke up that Sunday morning, and I'm telling you, I've never in my life been so sick.
Yeah.
My head, I've never had a headache like that, and I crawled to the phone. I didn't know what was going on. I just happened to call, and this was a Sunday morning.
Yeah.
I called the church building in Greenbrier, Arkansas, and I asked for Barbara Knight, who is the wife of the preacher there, and their family. They've known my family my whole life, and so grew up with their son, that kind of thing. So I called and I told her, I said, I can't take care of my family, and she said, I'll be right there. And so she left whatever they were preparing to do, but she left, came, and this was in February, and so it was. It was a kind of a warm February for the most part. Yeah. And so she came in, and she didn't know really what was going on. She just thought maybe some fresh air would help. And she said when she came in, she thought, Bree,
it's okay.
She thought Brianna was dead. So anyway, she opened the windows, opened the door, fresh air was coming in. Cheryl couldn't get out of the bed. She didn't. She said, she was laughing. She was thinking, there's no way he feels worse than I do. And so she was not getting out of bed, and the boys were still in the bed, and it was just a tough night. And so the next morning, I got up and had to go to work. And so I got to work, and I got to feeling better. Yeah. And so I was telling my boss about what happened. He goes, man, that sounds like a gas leak. You should call the gas company. And so I did. Called the gas company. They came out, and sure enough, they found the leak. And the guy said, had it been cold last night, you all would be dead. And I thought, okay. So that kind of got my attention.
A little bit.
And I thought, I've got 3 kids here and a wife. Maybe I need to start thinking about my roots a little bit.
Yeah.
Getting back to those. And so we kind of dabbled a little bit for a period of time. And one of the things that the church where we were attending that they did was on Sunday night, they would meet about 30 minutes before the service and they would just sing.
Yeah.
Well, I love to sing.
Yeah.
And so I would go, and I got to noticing that he would allow people to lead a song, but he would always stop right before he got to me.
Okay.
It didn't matter where I sat. If I sat in the front on the left, he would start on the right in the front, work his way from around,
try to trick
and
him
stop
over
right
else.
before he got to me. If I was in the back, he always worked the opposite way. And I thought, and it dawned on me, it took me about 3 weeks to figure that out.
Yeah.
And I was like, for the first time in my life, I felt like I'm on the outside
Yeah.
looking in. And so it was time to change things. And so I did. I went forward that night and I told him, I said, look, I've been away from the Lord and I need to come back and get things right. And I kind of made this vow. I didn't tell anybody about it except God. I told him, I said, whatever they want me to do, I'll do. If they want me to lead singing, I'll lead singing. If they want me to lead prayer, I'll lead prayer. If they want me to wait on the Lord's table, I'll wait on the Lord's table. Well, the first thing preacher asked me to do was preach. I was like, no, Lord, that's not what I had in mind.
That was not on the list.
That was not on my list. And so it was one of those, I hadn't preached before.
Yeah.
But he asked me to preach one Sunday night, and I'm telling you, I don't know how long or how hard I worked on that lesson, but I thought, they need to be 30 minutes. That's kind of the traditional time frame. And so I worked on it, and I probably, at best, it might have been 6 minutes.
Yeah.
At best.
I remember that. I mean, not yours.
And so on the way out the door, one of the men came up to me and he said, Bob, if you preach like that, you'll never have trouble getting a job.
Ain't that the truth?
I thought, okay, short is where it's at. But anyway, that led to a lot of things that kind of changed my life. And I ended up going to school and was trained to be a preacher and did mission work, and just a lot of things transpired. And we ended up back there at Greenbrier. We were in the mission field for about 5 years, and then I got a call from the church at Greenbrier, and they said, we're not even trying anybody out. If you want the job, it's yours. Wow. And so it was going home for us.
Yeah.
Because they had such an influence in our life. And so we went back there, and I preached there for 11 years.
Oh, wow.
And
okay, that story is rare in and of itself, because usually they say the worst thing you can do is preach where you,
Well, it's interesting. I had an opportunity to go back to school where I graduated at the Bear Valley Bible Institute. They wanted me to come back and teach.
Yeah.
And so I did. And so I left Greenbrier and went back there. I thought, this is the coolest thing ever.
Yeah.
I'll be able to teach.
Yeah.
Teach guys about what I learned. And so, and I did. Well, during the course of my time then, I was encouraged to go back to school and work on graduate level stuff.
Right.
And I thought, well, I didn't really have an accredited degree. And so they kept saying, you need to do it, you need to do it. So I wrote to Fuller Theological Seminary, and I asked them, is there even a reason for me to apply, with my academic background? And he said, all I can tell you is you need to apply. Yeah. And so I did, and they turned me down. And so that was really frustrating to me. So about 6 months, I finally wrote them, because they never gave me an answer. They just said, you didn't get in. And I said, I just need some closure. I need to know what was the reason. Was it the accreditation issue? Was it something else? And the director of their doctoral program contacted me, and he came to Denver and met with me for breakfast. And he said it really was the accreditation issue. He said, I thought I could get you through because I know what you did with the master's program at Bear Valley was with, accredited doctoral guys. And he said, I thought I could get it through. And he said, they just have requirements.
Yeah.
But he asked me, he said, if I can make it happen, would you be willing to go through the Masters of Arts in Global Leadership? And he said, if you're willing to do that, he said, it'd take you a little over 2 years, but he said, you would automatically qualify to get into the doctoral program.
Yeah.
And I said, even if I don't qualify, I said, I want to go through that program, because cool. I was all about leadership. And this is the reason I'm telling this story is because it kind of led to the second major event that probably had the biggest impact on my life.
Okay.
If it's possible to be bigger than that first one.
That's big.
But I went to school. They got me into the master's program at Fuller. And so there were 2 weeks of intensive courses every year, twice a year. And then we had work we did online. Well, the first time, I didn't know what to expect.
Yeah.
And so the first time I went, it was way out of my box. My element was not that.
Right.
It was people from every religious group you can imagine, and there were 22 of us, and every morning started with a worship, and they had bongos and drums and guitars, and I'm just kind of like...
Not a Church of Christ in Little Rock.
No, and I'm thinking, please, Lord Jesus, don't come back.
Yeah.
And I really did. I just kind of stood in the back and was just observing and trying to figure out what have I gotten into, what's going on. And every group, they had us divided up into 4 groups, and every group had to conduct one of the worship devotionals every morning. And so on Wednesday, we met to determine in the group I was in what we were going to do on Thursday morning. And one of the girls in the group said, I know what we can do. Let's do the Lord's Supper. I'll go get a loaf of French bread, and I'll get, I forget what the grape drink she was talking about getting, but in my mind I'm thinking, I'm going to die right here.
Yeah.
I have no idea what I'm going to do, what I'm going to say. And so I'm sitting there and throughout the whole day and just trying to contemplate this whole situation. And so at the end of the day, everybody left, and one of the guys that was in our group, awesome guy, Ryan Poe, I'll never forget him. He said, "Are you okay?" I said, yeah, I'm okay. And he said, "No, are you okay?"
Yeah.
I said, "Why don't you sit down?" And so anyway, he sat down, and I just explained to him why I couldn't participate in that stuff. I went through, why the instrumental music stuff was not my thing. I just wasn't going to do that. And for sure, the Lord's Supper on Thursday was not going to work for me. And he said, "Are you okay with us doing that?" And I said, "You can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
I just need you to know why I can't participate in that."
Yeah.
And he thanked me, and he said, I'd never heard those things. And I said, well, I just needed you to know, needed somebody to know. And so he thanked me, and that was the end of it, and never said another thing. And so the next morning when he got up, he had his guitar on, and he was singing a couple of songs. And then he said this. He said, "We've got the Lord's Supper up here." And he said, "And if your heart moves you to participate in this, it's here. But if your heart doesn't move you today to do that, that's okay also."
Yeah.
And I thought, he did that for me. Then he took his guitar off. And he said, "Let's just sing this next song with just our voices." And in that moment, I thought, he showed me such respect. And it dawned on me, you don't have to agree with people to show respect.
Yeah.
I've never known anybody who became a Christian or was converted because they were disrespected.
Yeah.
I went over here and I became a Christian because they disrespected me. I've never heard that before.
They told me how stupid I was and how wrong I was, and I really signed up.
Yeah. And I'm just like, that was one of the most powerful moments in my life, because I've always thought you've got to prove people wrong.
Yeah.
And I thought, you don't have to agree to show respect.
How long ago did this happen?
13 years ago. I was 50.
Yeah.
And I keep telling people, I can't believe it took me 50 years of life to figure that out.
But it's obvious that story is evidently just as powerful as it was on the day it happened.
Yeah. I mean, I'm very emotional about it because it's helped me realize that my approach to people when trying to tell them about Jesus and to help them come to know Jesus, I don't have to start off by trying to prove them wrong. I really try to start off where we agree.
Yeah.
And let's start off with that foundation first before we ever get to the things that maybe we disagree about.
Yeah.
And those conversations tend to go a whole lot better when we start on that basis, rather than trying to prove people wrong or to create an atmosphere where they feel wrong before we ever get a chance to see that we love the same God, we love the same Jesus, and believe that His Word teaches us what we need to do to get to heaven. And so let's start with that, and then we can move into those other
secondary stuff later. Yeah. Now,
So
the irony is we're sitting here recording and having this conversation on what day?
on a Tuesday,
It is.
Election Day.
It's election day. And I mean, you want a picture of people not learning that lesson.
Yeah.
It's happening in our parking lot right now. There's, Lord knows how many cars, how many signs,
Yeah.
and people ready to tell you that you are an idiot if you vote wrong, you're not a Christian if you get it wrong. And I have my opinions and I have my beliefs, and of course mine are right. That's why I have them.
Well, nobody does something because they think it's wrong.
Yeah.
At least most people I know, they don't do something because they think, I should do this because it's wrong. I mean, they believe what they believe is right. That's why they do it. And they vote the way they're going to vote because they believe that's right.
Yeah.
But, whether it's social media platforms or face-to-face conversations, I just think our world would be a whole lot better place if we just approached her from the standpoint of saying, I may not agree with you, and that's okay. I can still show respect.
Yeah.
And I don't have to condemn you. I don't have to prove you wrong. I just need to show respect.
And even in respect, not only did He show you respect, He showed you incredible kindness by saying, I don't have to do it my way so that you can have space to do it your way occasionally.
Yeah.
He didn't change the entire service. He didn't abandon it. But He created space for you.
Well, and the funny thing is my very last intensive course that I had with that same group of people, there was a different gentleman in that class that he was our very last day together. He was up doing the same thing. He was playing guitar and singing, and he did the same thing. And he took his guitar off and he said, as we kind of finish out, let's just sing with just our voices. And so we did. And I went up to him and I gave him a hug and I said, thank you for doing that. He said, I did that for you. And I thought, I just appreciated so much that he had learned, nobody told him, he had just learned from observing that was where I was at.
Yeah.
And so he chose to do the same thing to show that kind of respect. And so I valued that because I thought, had the circumstances been reversed, it would not have happened the same way.
Oh, yeah, that's a painful reality.
Yeah. And so I thought, this is probably a good thing for me to learn the lesson that you just don't have to agree to show respect. So those two events have probably had the greatest impact on me, not only in my focus needing to be on Christ, but as well learning that I can show respect to all people. And doing so is going to give me far greater opportunity to have an influence in their life. And since my work is about leadership, that's really what leadership is all about, is influencing people to move them from where they are to where they need to be. And in order for that to happen, I'm going to have to show respect because everybody thinks differently.
I heard a TED Talk one time, and the speaker asked the crowd, he said, what does it feel like to be wrong? And the crowd starts saying, embarrassing, you feel stupid, you feel, all those words that you can imagine to fill in. And he let him go for me. He goes, no. That's not what it feels like to be wrong. You're wrong all day, every day, and you don't know it. It feels perfectly fine.
Yeah.
What feels bad is finding out that you're wrong. He said that's an entirely different thing. And so then he started talking about that moment of how do we learn to be okay with the fact that we don't have it all right? And the point of the talk was learning to appreciate failure, which it was a cool talk, which, I mean, I hope a whole lot of heart surgeons weren't going to it or anything, but, no, but as a general rule for life, it was pretty cool just to think.
Well, and since you mentioned that about not having it all right, that was one of the questions that was also asked to me by one of my roommates, actually. And he said, do you think you have it all right? Well, no. I mean, there's nobody that has it all right. And so his question was, why do you think God is going to have grace for you in the areas where you don't have it right, but you don't think he's going to have grace for someone else who also doesn't have it right because they don't agree with you? And that was also in one of those moments where I thought, I've never thought about that, but it sure made me feel very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Made me feel very uncomfortable.
We've got a good history, if we go back far enough, of asking solid questions like that, When you go back to the Declaration and Address in some of our Restoration Movement history, this proposition that I won't judge a brother over what he has inferred from Scripture. That can't be a test of fellowship was kind of one of our church's 10 commandments 200 years ago. But unfortunately, it seems like society has moved towards certainty and posturing, religiously, politically.
In every area.
All over the place.
Yeah. Even in the area of leadership, I've found that everyone has an opinion of how leadership works, how it operates, who's a leader, who's not a leader. And again, in every arena, whether that's political, religious, in corporate world, educational world, everybody has a different perspective. And so I've learned to even ask students that I teach to interview a leader from all the different categories: military, educational, political, corporate, religious. Interview a different leader and just find out what those differences are and think about why would they be different. And it's interesting. I mean, obviously the bottom line comes down to the fact there are principles that apply to everybody in every realm of leadership.
People are people.
They are. And we're just about trying to influence people to move in the direction they need to move to reach their greatest potential.
So here's a thing that's kind of a frustrating paradox or whatever. We love confidence. We love certainty. It feels good. And so we, I think, are attracted to people who portray, I know the way. If you're hiking through the woods and one guy says, this is the trail that takes you to the top, and the other guy goes, well, I think it's this way, but I'm not totally sure. Which guy do you want to follow? Most people
Every time.
choose the guy who's charismatic and confident.
Yeah.
But the sinister underbelly, I think, of that is the guy who is confident is not always right. And in this world of social media and 24-hour news, we have amplified the confident and the loud. And man.
I was thinking about transactional leadership styles and how that, that positional aspect is, if you'll follow me, I'll take you in the right direction.
Yeah.
You'll end up in the right place if you follow me. And of course, there are others like the reward. If you follow me, I'll reward you. And coercion is if you follow me, I won't punish you. That kind of thing. But the bottom line is that transformational leadership comes down to two very important qualities. One is humility, and the other is service. And that service is based out of the love that we have for people to help them become who God wants them to be and to reach that greatest potential. And if we approach that with humility and we serve others, putting them above ourselves, as Paul wrote in Philippians, it will be amazing to see what will happen in the church if we do that.
The version of it I learned from James Hinkle here, I think his word was myurtic. I may not be saying that right. It was the word for midwife. And his model of leadership that he liked to talk about was that of a midwife. You recognize that the midwife is not the one who's doing the real work of having the baby, but the midwife is the one who is guiding the woman through the process, who has the knowledge and the resources and the ability to help her go where she wants to go, even in the moment that she doesn't really want to get there anymore.
Yeah.
And that's been one of my favorite images. And she gets her hands dirty, and it's a cool image to me that's so different than the I'm on CNN and I'm so smart and I've got $1 million suit and I've got 12 million Twitter followers and a blue check.
Yeah.
And you should listen to me.
Yeah.
It'd be fun. I wish we could like hit pause right here and then just go play like 10 commercials back to back, and you could watch those commercials and talk about those leadership styles as you see them. You know,
Oh, yeah.
This is the coercive model. This is this is a fear-based thing. This is because if people recognize it,
And you can really, if you pay attention to the way someone is speaking, you can determine it pretty quick.
Yeah.
If you're aware of them,
Yeah.
and you're watching for them.
Yeah.
You can see them pretty quick. So you can usually tell when someone is humble and that they are really about serving others, and not because of what they want to get out of it. I forget exactly who it was that said it, but the idea is that you can really determine the true character of an individual by the way they treat people who can do nothing for them.
Yeah.
And I've always liked that when it comes to the idea of leadership, because leadership is not about trying to influence people so that they'll get you what you want.
Right.
It's about trying to influence people to help them get what they want.
Yeah.
Help them reach their greatest potential. And if we have leaders doing that, then it's transformational.
Yeah.
It really is transformational.
Was it one of the football coaches? It was some version about, I get people to do what they don't want to do so they can get what they want more than anything, or something like that. I don't remember. I'm butchering that.
But it's a great thought, and I like that.
Yes. Well, I owe somebody 12 cents royalties now, I guess. I don't know.
Maybe so.
Was there anything else you'd like to share today?
I tell you, we've covered a lot.
Yeah, we have.
I
This
mean,
has
from
been
my
fast.
job and promoting my job to talking about some major things that have really had a great impact in my life. And
What did carbon monoxide and hard rock have in common? The Bob Turner.
Bob Turner.
Okay.
But thanks for having me on, and I just have grown to love and appreciate you. And
I'm so sorry.
I know you say that all the time, but I really do. I love to hear your thinking, the way that you present the message.
I enjoy our time together. We have some fun lunches. You guys should join us sometime. We solve all the world's problems.
That's
every
right.
Time.
3-hour lunches I enjoy them.
That's right.
It's kind of like an extension of our conversation today. So.
Don't tell my bosses how long we spent a little bite, okay?
Oh, sorry.
How do people get in touch with you if they're interested in finding out more?
Couple of different ways. I want to kind of point people, first of all, to the website, because the website has my contact information.
Perfect.
But www.salt.sunset.bible. If they'll go to that website, then they will be able to find all the information about what we do, and there's all kinds of resources on there that they can benefit from. But my email address is on there, bturner@sunset.bible. Okay. And so they're welcome to send me an email, contact me that way is probably the best way.
Cool.
And I'll be glad to write back. I try to respond pretty quick, usually within 12 hours, but sometimes it's 24, but I try to get back to people pretty quick. So
awesome. Well, very good. This has been fun. And friends, thank you so much for sharing a little bit of your time with us today and listening to us ramble a little bit. I don't know who's next week, but you'll find out when I do. You know where to find this podcast. It's on Spotify and YouTube and all those other podcasty places. Look, we don't get paid for this, so do whatever you want. Listen if you want, don't if you don't. I don't care. It's been a great week. We'll see you next time, and I know God's going to do some really cool stuff, so be paying attention, and you never know what you might see. See you next time.
Thanks for listening to Rough Drafts. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. While you are at it, help us spread the word by leaving a rating and review. Until next time, let's keep looking for how God writes His love into our stories.